Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Another guest episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. Very excited to have on with us 247 Sports Director of Scouting, Andrew Ivins, to talk about Georgia's 2024 recruiting class. Georgia is closing in on the start of the early sign-in period in December, a couple weeks away at this point. Georgia's still sitting at number one in the country with 28 commits. Thought we'd have Andrew on, talk a little bit about this class, how things are shaping up for the Bulldogs. Andrew, just to start off, we're talking to you on this Thursday afternoon. How has this week been for you as we close in on what will be assuredly a very busy early sign-in period in college football?
Yeah, man, 13 days. We've gotten to the point where you write out a plan for the day, and then by 11 a.m., you got to crumble it up because things are changing and rapidly, and you're getting pulled in all these different directions. But it's a fun time of the year. You know, transfer portal has dominated, I think, the headlines this week. But high school recruiting is just as important. Georgia knows that. I mean, they build through the prep ranks, and you know, it should be fun to see how these 2 weeks go.
So let's look at this class on the whole, Andrew. 28 commits, 3 5-stars. Georgia has been the number one team in the country as far as the 2024 class for quite some time. There was some thought at one point that Georgia might have a chance to set the all-time recruiting record as far as points. Doesn't seem like that's going to happen, but still a very, very strong class, obviously being at number one. Just when you look at this class in general for Georgia, Andrew, what stands out to you and what the Bulldogs have been able to do in this cycle?
I think you got to start with the offensive line. I think they call it the Great Wall of Athens. The 6 offensive line commits. I went back and I tried to do some research, and I think in the past 5 years, I didn't have the time to go back much further than that. This is going to be the biggest offensive line haul in the SEC when you look at just pound for pound. I mean, everyone is over 6'5". And the group average is close to 345 pounds. So Kirby Smart has said it, you know, they want a bunch of mass. They want to hoard the mass. And I think Georgia is doing just that. I mean, they have these creatures up front. So that stands out, number one. I think number two, the fact that they got 2 quarterbacks committed, and not only 2 quarterbacks, but like 2 blue chip quarterbacks, 2 kids we saw at the Elite 11 finals. Obviously, Brock Vandagriff is headed to Kentucky. You know, he transferred out. I've thrown this out there. I think Georgia kind of might be ahead of the curve here with taking these prep quarterbacks. I mean, look at all the arms that are in the transfer portal. You know, I would just volume shoot if you have the ability to do that. Georgia does at that quarterback position, because you never know what's going to happen when they get on campus. And you also don't know in terms of injuries. I mean, look at obviously Florida State with Jordan Travis, but how many games in the past, I don't know, month or so, and you see it in the NFL as well. I mean, guys are just dinged up. So I think that's such an important position. I'm a big fan, obviously, of Dylan Raiola, and I'm buying stock in Ryan Puglisi after watching his senior stuff.
Let's start with Dylan Raiola, obviously one of the top recruits in the country. Georgia lands him, former Ohio State commit. In watching him, Andrew, what has stood out to you the most about Dylan's game and what he could bring to the Bulldogs?
I think he's the perfect quarterback for what Kirby Smart wants his football team to be on the offensive side of the ball. He protects the football. Through 250 passes as a senior, just 1 interception. So that is the best interception rate I've come across so far in the 2024 cycle for quarterbacks. I think I'm through like 20 of them in their senior seasons. I mean, he protects it. The second thing is just the command of the offense and his ability to not panic. Like, he always seems calm. And I was at his season opener against St. Francis. And then, you know, I've watched a bunch of games, a bunch of tape of him since then. I love how he moves in the pocket. He's a big frame. He's not afraid to take some sacks, but I don't think he gets enough credit for his ability to extend plays when things break down. Now, I'm not saying he's a true dual threat, but just that moxie in the pocket. You know, he's got a good internal clock. He feels the pressure. He finds some green grass, and he keeps his eyes down the field. And then finally, just that deep ball. He didn't have the biggest supporting cast in terms of height when it came to the wide receivers at Buford this season. So, he's not throwing to a bunch of big targets, but man, he gets it down the field. I think maybe, you throw some different receivers into that equation and maybe the numbers look a little bit better. But man, that arm, we saw him at the Elite 11 finals with a lot of these other guys, and all 3 days that certainly stood out. And yes, it's throwing on air, it's throwing in shorts and whatnot, but he can do it in pads as well.
You gave some praise to Ryan Puglisi. What do you like about his game? Because there seems to be people that are super excited about him, just as many people are about Raiola.
Yeah, I watched his final game. I don't really know how it works up there in Connecticut in terms of like the playoffs, or it's like a league playoff. I just think he needs some seasoning. I love the tools with him, and what's unique about both these quarterbacks is baseball backgrounds. And Puglisi, he's got a live arm as well, a strong arm, and you could see the baseball background there. For me, with him, he just needs to learn how to change speeds and throw with touch. Stop trying to throw the fastball every single time. And his senior season, what I also noticed is he can pick up the chains and run. He can run design quarterback draws and pick up yardage. Now, I know he's not facing the best competition, but I like that element of his game. Throws on a tight line over the middle. And he's younger. He doesn't. I don't think he turns 18 until later this month. Actually, I think it's the first day of the signing period. So it's that total package. I just think he has a ton of room to grow. Now he's got to buy in. So learn the playbook, soak in the coaching and all that stuff. But I think there is a pretty big ceiling with him. And I've heard the same. Talking with people in Athens, like there's something about that kid. And I'll be honest. Coming out of the Elite 11 finals, maybe I was like, I don't know. And then the senior tape, I'm a believer now in Puglisi.
Yeah, it seems like Georgia has got a good problem on its hands by bringing in a couple of quarterbacks who are going to push each other these next few years. Andrew, definitely want to make sure and talk to you about some of those other 5-stars that Georgia is in line to sign. I want to start with Ellis Robinson. Georgia's done a very good job since Kirby Smart has been the head coach of bringing in very talented defensive backs. And based on everything we've seen from Ellis Robinson, seems like he is set to be the next one.
Yeah, I mean, he is exactly how you want them to look. Over 6'1". He went as a junior 4.5 in the 40-yard dash on the lasers. He's got long arms, ball skills. I actually watched 2 of IMG Academy's games this morning, and he is just smooth. He can play press man coverage. He can play off man coverage. He maintains phase so well on the outside. He wasn't challenged a ton over the course of his senior season, which isn't surprising. I mean, IMG's got an excellent pass rush. Quarterbacks don't have a ton of time, but I think he had 2 interceptions. I know there was at least 3 or 4 games where he had multiple pass breakups. I think he's one of the surest things here in the 2024 cycle. Georgia, I don't know what the current cornerback depth chart looks like, but I think he could play if he was called upon, year 1 and certainly by year 2 and year 3. And I think that's what Kirby and those guys have created there in Athens. I mean, they want competition. They're going to play the young guys if they're ready to go. And I just like Ellis's mindset. What also stands out about him, last year, I don't think he tore his MCL, but he tweaked something in his knee, and he could have very well shut it down. I mean, so many of these kids would just shut it down, but he came back, played in the season finale against St. Francis Academy up in Baltimore. I think they played at Maryland Stadium. It was a cold game, and he had a key pass breakup to preserve the season for them and get them that victory. I mean, that's kind of like their unofficial, national title game. So I like the mindset. Early on, I thought, hey, maybe he's a safety. I'm kind of buying into him as a field corner. And the one area, I guess, where it's like, all right, I want to see, a little bit more, maybe as an open field tackler, kind of getting off blocks. That's why I wouldn't maybe say boundary, but he's a box checker. He's the real deal. Excited to see him at the Under Armour All-America game, assuming that, he works out and whatnot, but he doesn't need to. I mean, he's proven who he is over the years.
Last but not least, with these 5 stars, linebacker Justin Williams, a guy that sounds like a lot of folks around Athens are very excited about.
Yeah, man, dude, Georgia just loads up on linebackers. Last year, we couldn't figure out how to stack C.J. Allen, Raylan Wilson, Troy Bowles. You asked anyone at Georgia, they struggled with that as well. But it was by far the best linebacker class. Now you're bringing in Justin, Chris Cole, Christopher Jones is also. I mean, it's like they just reload over and over again. Justin watched his final game of his senior season. For someone that I think initially was more of a running back early on in his prep career, I thought the instincts stood out for him working as a Mike right there in the middle of the defense. I mean, his ability to read and react certainly stood out. He is an exceptional athlete, a guy I had on my freaks list. I mean, another 4.5 guy in the 40-yard dash. I mean, he closes gaps in the snap of a finger. He's excellent at flowing downhill. Now there are occasions where he'll overrun things, and I think that's a product of him just being kind of a freak athlete. Wasn't asked to drop back a ton in coverage, but he looks like a natural there. Got his hands on a pass in the game I watched. Another one we're excited to see at the All-Star games. And again, like Georgia just reloads at that position. I mean, the competition there to get on the field at linebacker, that second level, is it's wild to me, because you add Raylan Wilson to the equation, Troy Bowles, who was a safety for a lot of his senior season at Tampa Jesuit. And then obviously C.J. Allen, who I think started 3 or 4 games there late due to injury. I think he's good enough to get in the mix and push those guys, and that's what Georgia wants.
A lot of credit to Kirby Smart and Glenn Schumann. It's funny, you talk about that group from last year, Andrew. Coming into this cycle, all of us around the team were like, okay, maybe they'll take one, but surely they can't, stack the talent after what they just signed, and well, they go and do it again.
Yeah, Chris Cole, to me, I didn't know much about him until back in May. Saw him at the Under Armour camp in Baltimore, and I thought the linebacker, like the mid skills, were the best position groups there. You had some good running backs, and then this group of linebackers. So it was Christopher Jones, Chris Cole, and Aaron Childs. And my favorite was Chris Cole of the bunch. He's high hipped and he's got long legs. It's kind of rare to see. Another guy that initially was more of a safety, always want to move them forward. And I mean, obviously Georgia knows that. They got Muschamp, Lanning, Kirby, you rattled it off, but yeah, I'm a big fan of him. He reminds me a little of Demarion Overshawn, who was at Texas now, I think with the Dallas Cowboys, day 2 type of selection. I think he's got a ton of developmental upside now for him. I think he's going to have to get his feet wet, learn to play in the SEC with that physicality, wrap up tackling, but another just physical freak.
Take a quick break, come back with Andrew, talk a little bit more about this class, and maybe project a little bit about what we'll see this time next year. Andrew, getting back into this, went on the Junkyard, asked for a few questions from the subscribers about this class, and had a few people ask about Georgia's running backs in this class. I got 3 commits, headlined by Nate Frazier. I just want to see if you had any thoughts on this group, the running backs that Georgia has landed for this cycle.
Well, all 3 of them made my freaks list. And for those not familiar, it's just like what Bruce Feldman does, a little bit more dialed down. So try to identify the freakiest athletes every cycle. I think I'm 3 years into it, and it's cool now because some of the guys I highlighted have now made Feldman's freaks list. And I had all three of the running backs on there. I think they complement each other really well. And that's the name of the game right now. I mean, by committee approach at running back, feed the hot hand when someone's hot. But Dwight Phillips, obviously, Olympic pedigree, pun intended there with his father, but one of the fastest recruits out there. I think he's a guy you kind of scheme and gadget stuff up for. Don't really know about him between the tackles, but the good thing is you got Chauncey Bowens, who's at the Benjamin School there in North Palm Beach. I was at one of his games, I want to say 2 months ago. A freak in the weight room. To me, just needs to lean into him being, 225 pounds and a battering ram. We're going to see him at the All-American Bowl. An evaluation I've had circled for a long, long time, because Benjamin School doesn't play the highest of classification. So I want to see what he looks like. Number one, he's going to have a good offensive line in front of him. And then there's going to be SEC and future Big Ten defenders trying to take his head off. So Bowens is kind of the thunder. Phillips is kind of the lightning. And then Nate Frazier, I think he's dealt with some injuries here as a senior, but I think he's kind of a good mix of the two of them. He can work the middle of the field, and he can also bounce it outside. So it's a fun group. And correct me if I'm wrong here, I think Georgia's even looking to take some running backs in the transfer portal. They seem to want to completely retool and rebuild that room. And I'm interested to see, just like those three linebackers I talked about in the 2023 cycle, like who kind of emerges as the guy from Georgia in this 2024 class. My money's probably on Nate Frazier, but we'll see. I mean, nothing would surprise me.
Definitely. As you mentioned, Andrew, I think they're going to target a running back in this portal cycle. It's got to be the right guy, but looks like one of the right guys might have gone in the portal on Thursday in Travis Etienne. I think they're going to go hard after him, stacking, just on top of an embarrassment of riches, really, across the board. When you look at this class, Andrew, and you talked about this a little bit with Ellis Robinson, but are there people in this class for Georgia that you think have a chance to make an immediate impact when we look to next season?
Yeah, I gotta scroll down the list here. Nitro Tuggle, the wide receiver, is an interesting one. We were kind of fired up that he was going to be at IMG Academy. There was talk of him transferring in there. I don't know if he ever actually went to. They don't go to classes; it's all online. But I don't know if he was ever on campus. But he's from Indiana, and he's from like Amish country up there. Like it's not the greatest competition. And his junior highlight tape, there wasn't a better open field runner at the receiver position than him. I think you can make that argument. He would reverse fields, and you're like, okay, it's against this Indiana competition. A lot of these guys are going to go to school to be doctors and lawyers, not football players. So he's in one of the All-Star games. I don't know off the top of my head, but I think he has the physical clay, the twitch and the bounce to potentially, try to work his way into that receiver rotation. Again, we'll see what he looks like in this setting when he's around all of these different individuals. George is just so stacked. I think the offensive lineman, to me, that looks the most ready to go, probably Daniel Calhoun at Walton. Just another monster of a human. And what excites me, or what I look forward to seeing with Calhoun, is what does he look like after 6 months in that weight room there in Athens? Like, he's going to have to melt down a little bit. And I know Georgia wants to keep them big, but can he add some core strength? We list him as a tackle. I wouldn't be surprised if he's at, left or right guard, and maybe potentially, if something were going to happen there, kind of a wild card here. What about Nasir Johnson? Defensive lineman, they flipped from Florida, out of Dublin, obviously a smaller town. I'm a big fan of him. He was a huge riser for us in the last update. I think there's a chance he could keep climbing up the board, but having watched Georgia's kind of IDL takes, I think he's the one that might be the most ready if he were called upon. Now, I'm not saying, hey, he's going to be, you know, at the top half of the rotation, but just like Jordan Hall this season, you know, I think Jordan Hall got some run as the season progressed. Like, he can get it done at the point of attack, and he can get it done at both sides of the ball. And then finally, last guy who I've always kind of had a soft spot for is Sokovie White. You know, he's 5'8", but I go back to in my stored in that memory bank 2 years ago at the National Combine in San Antonio, that's the day before the All-American game. Sokovie White was there, and he might have been the offensive MVP. In hindsight, should have been the alpha dog. He just scored touchdown after touchdown. You know, he's also a basketball player, runs track. I love the profile. I wish he was a little bit bigger, but I think he could be a potential special teams ace. He's got that short area quickness. I heard someone tell me, hey, like maybe slot corner. I don't know about that. But he's just a guy I think you want in your program. And I think he could provide maybe a spark on special teams in some type of role.
It's always difficult trying to say who's going to make an immediate impact at a school like Georgia. They're just so deep, but those do seem like really good options. And the Nasir Johnson's the one that really interests me because, you know, Georgia we still don't know yet, but maybe losing some really veteran interior defensive linemen could set up for someone like Nasir to step in there and play, maybe not right away, but fairly early on.
And one more name, I don't really know the latest with him, but like Terrell Anderson, the NC State wide receiver commit out of Grimsley. I got a scouting crush on him. You know, I just love his whole game. I love his size. You know, I think he's returned 4 kickoffs for touchdowns. People don't think he's the fastest cat, but he goes and gets the football at the catch point, and he also scores touchdowns. So, you know, we'll see if Georgia, you know, goes that route and if he ends up in the class. But I do think a lot of him, you know, higher floor prospect. And I think he could maybe be ready to go sooner rather than later.
Definitely looks like it's going to be either a portal receiver or picking him up there from NC State because he's definitely a very talented option for Georgia. When you look at these commits, 28 commits, Andrew, is there a guy that, you know, really has impressed you the most out of this group? It might not be one of those top-rated guys, just someone that has really caught your eye with what they've been able to
do. So I'm going to the Shrine Bowl early next week, Monday, Tuesday. Just watched this kid last night, and I'm probably going to butcher his name. Nnamdi Ogboko out of South Garner, the defensive lineman. He is, I hate using the word intriguing, but I'm going to use it here. Intriguing. I mean, 6'4", 335 pounds. He ran a 4.72 short shuttle at 334, which is crazy to me. He's like a potential kind of war daddy. I think he's the ideal 1 tech, 0 tech. You can play him in a shade, doubled as a left guard for his high school team. Also a basketball player. And if you've ever seen a photo of him or watched his highlights, he's got like one of the most unique lower halves out there. I mean, he has got like tree trunks for like thighs and quads. He's got mass and a ton of ass. I don't know if I can say that, but
yeah.
For Georgia and what they want to do, you know, with an odd man front, like I could see him emerging kind of as a guy, maybe not like right away, but you look up in 2 or 3 years and like he's just kind of a staple in there. So he was someone that definitely has caught my eye. Marcus Harrison up in the offensive tackle up in New York, you know, I was campaigning to get him in the All-American Bowl. And the big reason why is like we've never really seen him. I mean, he's right outside of Buffalo, but listed at 6'7.5", 336 pounds. I've seen some workout videos of him in a gym. I think Georgia and Stacy Searles saw the same video, and that's when they decided to make a move on him. You know, there is something there. Excellent down blocker. That's what he put on tape as a senior. And then finally, Andrew Ivins, you know, who they flipped from LSU. I've been a fan behind the scenes for a while. I know we just moved him into the top 247. I was saying we should do it back in the summer months, but we wanted to get some senior tape. Got some senior tape. He's at CPA there in Nashville. I think what stands out about him is the combination of size and speed. He's pushing 200 pounds, and he's got a ton of sub 11 second efforts in the 100, and he's a physical tackler. So those are, I don't know, three maybe not headliners that I'm pretty bullish on.
Before we wrap this up, Andrew, who is an under the radar prospect in this class that really has caught your eye that, Georgia fans may be talking about those top rated guys, but they shouldn't forget about these guys?
Well, I think you can put those three guys into the category. I think you can put Sokovia White in there. I mean, you just when you take 28 guys, if Sokovia White is, 26, 27, or 28, I think that's a recipe for success. Quintavious Johnson out of Mays there in Atlanta. I think it was the first or second game of his season. I was there. There's something there. I mean, developmental upside. He's played some quarterback in the past. I like the frame. To me, the question is, all right, are they gonna try him as a stand-up edge rusher? I think he could do that. Or do they, add a bunch of mass to him and try to maybe work him inside as like a 5 tech or something like that, or a 4-eye. I think there's a chance for that. And then finally, the lowest ranked commit, man, besides for Drew Miller, the punter, who was our highest ranked punter this cycle. He's quite the find. Colton Heinrich. I'm based in South Florida. Colton Heinrich, I've had a ton of exposure to. He's like a move tight end prospect. It's been a tough evaluation for me. Todd Hartley, I'm not going to knock any take he has at the tight end position. I think his work speaks for itself. I'm a big fan of Todd Hartley, but I will be following Colton because I want to see, what he's able to do. And I think he makes sense for Georgia, right? I mean, there's gonna be a lot of 2 and 3 tight end sets. I think he's a guy, he's a good move blocker. I don't know if he's ever going to be much of a vertical threat, but he can find leverage. And I think a year or two in that strength and conditioning program, want to see what he looks like after that. And he can slip out of the field and catch some passes. And I know Georgia loves his mentality, loves his mindset. I believe Dad is a police officer here in the Broward County area. So he's one not to sleep on as well.
Andrew, I really appreciate you popping on during what is a very busy time of year and talking to us about Georgia. This question may be about as long as this podcast has been, but what do you have coming up? Just what do these next few weeks look like for you?
Well, it's like I said, I'm going to the Shrine Bowl. I was hoping to make it over to the Alabama-Mississippi game. My colleague, Cooper Bratagna, is going to be out there. I mean, great event. But this year, the Shrine Bowl, I mentioned, Georgia's got to commit it. But there's a ton of offensive linemen. So I'm fired up about that. And then, on deck, we got the National Signing Day show for 247 Sports. That's going to be on January 20th, wall-to-wall coverage. I've heard some rumblings of some coach interviews. I'm sure we're going to have live announcements, but really just not putting a bow on the class, but just highlighting, position halls we love, classes we like. And, it seems like Georgia, it's all but sewn up that number one spot. You're right. I've played around with the class calculator. They can't catch Texas A&M, but hey, is that 2022 class really what it is now with all those guys in the portal? So it'll be fun, right? Kirby's first number one class potentially in 3 or 4 years. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, I want to say it was 2019 or 2020.
Yeah, I think 5 years maybe. So it should be a fun day for Georgia. And then we're gonna have full coverage again at the All-American Bowl and the Under Armour All-American game. And there's a ton of dogs in those games. And I think some of them are going to go to bowl practices and then maybe show up. I remember Raylan Wilson did that last year. And then he was like the most dominant linebacker because I think he had, kind of got his teeth handed to him when he was practicing with UGA, and then he showed up and he was ready to go.
You talk about a trial by fire. I do not envy those guys being put in that situation. We'll wrap it up there. Again, Andrew, thanks so much for the time. Want to make sure and tell everybody, go to dogs247.com. Go to our YouTube, Dogs247. Got all kinds of great content on both platforms there. So for Andrew Ivins, I am Jordan Hill. Until next time, take care, everybody.